Hello and welcome to the ninth episode of the Connect the Dots NYC podcast. I am your host, Vedant Vohra, and I am so excited to take you on this journey as we explore different solutions to homelessness. As the creator of the CTD NYC app, I've seen how technology can connect people to vital resources. CTD NYC helps individuals experiencing homelessness in New York City access shelters, food, and healthcare, bridging the gap between them and essential services. It's a powerful example of innovation meeting compassion to tackle the homelessness crisis. Each episode, we'll dive into stories, strategies, and innovations from those on the front lines, whether they're advocates, policymakers, service providers, or individuals with lived experiences. My goal is to spark meaningful conversations and shine a light on the incredible work being done to make housing more accessible for everyone. Thank you for joining me today, and let's get started. Amanda Nicholson is a consultant, community organizer, researcher, and mixed media artist. She was a 2024 creative in residence and at Painted Brain in Los Angeles. By the age of 18, Amanda completed 2 residencies through the Museum of Modern Art, Teens program in New York. She combines lived experience with meticulous research to serve up hard truths that are often concealed. Through rigorous investigation and raw storytelling, Nicholson strips away the layers of duplicity surrounding complex social issues. Her raison d'etre is the pressing reconstruction of social safety nets. Amanda provides education on self-advocacy and how to leverage existing permanent housing resources. In June 2024, Amanda joined the board of ClearPath NYC, a nonprofit digital wellness resource hub for youth and young adults. She has spoken at industry-leading events such as the National Human Service Data Consortium, National Lived Experience Leadership, and Love Fest. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi, Vedant. Thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have you on the show. I want to start with your origins and your creative journey. So, from teen residencies at MoMA to being a 2024 creative in residence at Painted Brain, how did those early experiences shape your identity as an artist and community advocate?
What was so cool about the MoMA Teens program was that it allowed me to redefine the function of art. So, even if you think about the MoMA or any prestigious art institution, we're typically thinking of paintings on the wall, maybe some sculptures. But this program and the 2 different cohorts that I was a part of showed me how to integrate technology and performance art and photography and hands-on building, and all these different m- mediums and methods of creating art that I really wasn't thinking about because I knew I didn't like painting. I didn't feel like my paintings were Picasso or or Basquiat or anything else. So it was nice to see how much more art could be. In particular, there was an artist that we visited. So during MoMA Teens, they would always take us on like field trips and stuff, and there was an artist we visited. His name is either Anthony Brito or Andrew Brito. I'm butchering his name right now, but his artworks were very much about pushing social constructs, social beliefs and systems, and was sometimes really violent in the ways that it did it. Like it really made commentaries about racism and the use of racial slurs. Like one was, and I love to talk about this piece, was mirrors on the floor, and each mirror had a different racial slur or like slurs for ethnic groups, so that when you were looking at that term, you were also looking at yourself. And it was pushing you to be like, if you could say that, that's also you, you know? Um, and that really made me feel like I can do anything with art. I can make statements, I can make people uncomfortable, I can make people think. In particular, when I did the first residency, it was called Stop or I'll Shoot. And while we were within that cohort, Trayvon Martin was murdered. And we talked about that in the cohort. And we talked about racial, and also we saw Andrew Brito, pretty sure his name's Andrew, during that time as well. And so it showed me that art can really make people think, make people feel, make people look at the world with new eyes. And I love that.
In your work fuses mixed media art and research-led storytelling. So, how do you integrate your lived experiences into your creative process?
At the end of the day, you are the best narrator of your life. So it is through your knowledge, your experience that you can really bring your experiences to life. And some parts of my artworks are observations of things that I saw while I was experiencing homelessness directly, right? I have two metal signage pieces. It's a piece called Rules, Policies, and Procedures. And I created that piece so quickly because I was pulling from my experience. I was pulling from both the sarcastic statements I wanted to make and also quite literally things people said to me or things that I observed. So, for example, within that piece, there's like a schedule for an overnight rain shelter, right? And so you have to check in at 4, you have to check back in at 7, curfews at 9, and then at 4 a.m. you're released back into the rain that you were escaping. And I wrote that on the piece because that's actually the real schedule of a overnight shelter in San Diego. And so I didn't have to make it up. You know what I mean? Like I can just pull from what I know and the irony, what's so funny about it all is the irony in that reality is what really grabs people. Is people read it and they almost can't believe it's true, but they also know it's true because they see it themselves. One of your previous guests, Rob Robinson, mentioned the UN adequate housing guidelines and like the guidelines for implementation. And it was exciting, one, to hear someone mention that because that's really what drove me into housing advocacy. And it's something that I referenced directly in the piece. Like, we are going to violate your rights. You have forfeit your rights. You put your humanity in the bin in the left when you came here, things like that is really about, again, the making people uncomfortable with the truth.
Could you walk us through a recent artwork or piece that you're proud of that embodies stripping away layers of duplicity on a social issue? What sparked it and what was the outcome?
One of the pieces I really enjoyed making is called Poverty Prison. And so it's a Lego and miniature model, quite literally. It's like displayed on a table. And all in all, it's a pretty large piece, despite how little everything is. And so it includes an interim housing hotel that also has like a rooftop lounge for the elite on top, um, which is a reference to interim housing that existed during the pandemic, where they were literally renting out the top floor as event space for private companies and for celebrities and unbelievable stuff is going on. Okay. Um, and so at first, when I knew I wanted to make the piece, I didn't really have a plan in mind, but I knew that I wanted to highlight the interim housing, and I knew I had all these food miniatures, and I wanted to make a commentary on food and food justice. That blossomed into a piece that's almost like a Where's Waldo or a I Spy, which I grew up playing, and so it's a quite busy piece and at the same time it's not overwhelming. It's not like so much is going on that you can't see the piece as a whole, but as you go through you see different food brands that you're familiar with and the food and other possessions are kind of thrown and sown throughout what would have been the street, right? Outside of this interim housing, you have the person that's living there, that's an artist and I ended up building their like hotel room out of cardboard. We made 3D printed furniture and found a couple of furniture pieces, but we mostly made 3D printed furniture and worked the miniatures into the room. I even I laid carpet that I dug out the trash from a carpet place and then molded the carpet myself so that it could have that smell of authenticity. Um, and so you see a commentary about food quality, like the food on the ground is a different quality of food than the food that's in that elite space. And actually, the food is above even the elite miniatures to kind of make that comment that food rules us all, right? So there's this dynamic of space and level kind of showing privilege, showing power. There's politicians on both levels. There's police, there's security guards, there's a shopping cart. Um, and once I built it one time, every single time I built it after, it looked slightly different. But it was so exciting because I was able to stand back and look and be like, what else does it need? What's it missing? And be able to fill that in.
I want to move to your advocacy in housing and social safety nets. And you made housing advocacy a central mission. And so how does your work help people access permanent housing resources and build self-advocacy skills?
So one of the ways that I do that is through workshops. That's kind of where it started, workshops and resource distribution. So I meet up with folks who are in interim housing, who were in danger of being sent back to congregate shelter or were being told like they were service resistant. And I really broke down not just how these systems work, but also how you can, with what is limitedly available, make them work for you. How do you make sure whatever limited stuff they've got, how do you get some of it? And really use my lived experience to hand people their power back. And one, serve as like a testament of a person who nagged and pushed and wouldn't give up and was able to become permanently housed through that relentlessness. And also to show them, once you see how something works, the average person already is looking for how they can navigate it. But so many people dealing with these systems don't know how things truly work, or they'll be promised something, and then someone will turn around and say that's not available or that they don't qualify for it. And they don't actually know what the scope of a program is. So I love digging through scope of services and program agreements and things like that. As an example, here in LA, there's a program called Inside Safe, which is an interim housing situation where they put people in motels, and people had been asking for months from the staff, can we have the program agreement? Like, just show me the full agreement. You made me sign the last page, but you never showed me the 30 pages that came before it, right? And so we showed up at that site doing distro along with other mutual aid folks. So there's food, there's art, there's harm reduction, and then there's these program agreements. And we ran out pretty fast, actually. And so many people came up to us and they were like, I have been asking for this for months. And what disturbed me most of all was that this documentation is public. That's how I found it. It's sitting on the city agency website because they're required to make it public. So there should have been no barriers to accessing this. And it was very important for me to eliminate that barrier.
What's one systemic barrier you consistently encounter around social safety nets, and how do you challenge or dismantle it through your work?
I love that question. You ask really good questions. I was thinking that, like, damn, but I not really did that. um, so first I want to say that we have this legacy through enslavement of what it means to work and work hard and what is work ethic. And while we can talk about systemic racism, we can talk about the legacy of slavery in so many areas of our life, we have not at all unpacked the impact that has on work and value of work, right? And so we tell people that if they don't work, they're lazy. If they're not willing to be underpaid, they're lazy. But all of that understanding of laziness is built upon enslavement. You know what I mean? There's an amazing book, The Half That's Never Been Told. I don't remember the author, but it traces the roots of capitalism, particularly in measuring production, in quotas, and methods that we're now very accustomed to in our lives, right? And it pinpoints where those started in chattel slavery. And that's the reality, is that there's no space for a break. There's no space for leisure. There's no space to slow down production because then you're lazy, right? And so it's really important for me to challenge who is defining lazy and around what like context are they defining it, right? Because who really deserves easy work? Is it the person who does the easiest work who makes the most money and that's normal? And the person who works the hardest just doesn't get that and that's also normal? And that's something that we as a society really have to break ourselves from. We have to break ourselves from the meritocracy of only once you've earned something, then you can have something. Because moving towards regenerative, not just systems in the world, but within our own life and with our in our own spirit, your life is really not about how much work you're going to do till the day you die. That might be a part of it. And when you some of the work that you do, hopefully not till the day you die, right? But some of the work that you do is a part of your life and your life story, but it isn't supposed to be your central piece. Like now looking back, it's so abnormal that we're already trying to build a vision for a career in a child that's still exploring things. Like I think that that's closing the doors on the room for growth and the room for pivots and the reality that life is not well planned out and neatly prepped for most people, especially people who have lower resources. Um, and so I think that's everything. Yeah.
And as a consultant, what practical steps do you encourage nonprofits, local governments, or funders to take to rebuild those broken systems, like you mentioned?
That's another very, very good question. First, I want to acknowledge at the end of the day, building systems that are truly rooted in care are all about the community piece, right? And that's the person that doesn't profit to help you. That's the person that doesn't profit to support you and care for you. And while everybody deserves energy exchange, right? I believe in that. I believe people deserve resources for their time, their effort, their knowledge. That's something very different from the nonprofit industrial complex and the idea that we actually have to keep a problem going so that somebody makes a lot of somebodies make a really nice paycheck, right? And in fact, in that metal signage piece that I was referring to earlier, I have a line that says, "We profit off of your crisis. Please remain in crisis." And that's the reality, like as long as it's lucrative to keep people in interim housing, why would we invest in permanent housing? Just why, That's not the person whose paycheck is getting cleared. I don't see why they would invest, right? But as far as what organizations, governments, funders can do, it's really going to come down to direct cash transfers in many cases. And we're finally seeing that not only become established within the industry, but actually be researched and legitimized because when you say give people money, it doesn't sound as nice as when you say direct cash transfer. But that's the reality. You have to materially increase the quality of people's lives directly. And usually that means giving them the resources that they need to do the things they need to do.
And I want to shift even further into your community work and your digital almost wellness with ClearPath NYC. And so in June of 2024, you joined ClearPath NYC's board. And what energized you about their mission, and what role are you playing in shaping digital wellness for youth?
I was really excited to join ClearPath because I saw that they had a foundation in organizing and organizers directly were involved. And that's what really drew me in. Because, like I said from the previous question, I'm very aware of the nonprofit industrial complex and I don't agree. Okay. So I was really interested in an organization that wasn't just, again, looking to profit off of providing mediocre solutions. And I really love that it's rooted in the by young people for young people values because people have to control their own story. They have to control their own life, no matter what they're going through, even in crisis. Having that sense of control of your life gives you back your power, gives you back your sense of self. And it definitely did for me. And so I'm really excited that ClearPath has now we have a web portal, apps on both the Google and Apple app stores and Google Play, Apple App. And so some of what my work has been over the past year, aside from connecting us to funding opportunities and really building our power, has been about pulling that technology background that I have. I didn't mention this, but I studied business administration and computer science in undergrad. I went to Columbia for a couple of semesters. And so I was able to bring technology knowledge that I had kind of been sitting on and feeling like, why do I know all of this? And it finally served a purpose. And I was like, okay, I now see why I got a nano degree in business analytics and all these different things because I was able to think about as a user, particularly as a person with lived experience, when I was looking for a resource, accuracy, speed, and ease to the next step of more information were all three key things that determined if I trusted a resource or not. And I really want to make sure that ClearPath is a trustworthy resource not just another app in the App Store. And much like Connect the Dots, that it's something people want to use, that it's something people are drawn to and feel like this is something easy, especially when we're talking about younger folks. We know that they expect things to be online automatically. No one's flipping through a phone book to find a resource, you know?
And digital well-being is an emerging field. So how do you see it intersecting with homelessness, community organizing, and mental health?
I define digital well-being, ironically, as like knowing your limits, knowing when to unplug, knowing how to be conscious about your information and very intentional about who has access to it. And when I think about it from that lens, especially around homelessness, it makes me think of folks having, again, direct access to their own information. When we spoke, I spoke at a conference in New Orleans a couple of months ago, and that was specifically about the information system that's used to manage all homeless systems across the country. There's like a core system that they all use, HMIS. And it was important for me to say, just like we can introduce and integrate trauma informed care into the services that we provide and harm reduction principles into the services we provide, let's integrate that into the platform that allows us to provide those services. Whether that means, again, letting people see their own information, upload their documents, see if they're in a queue, request, different referrals, and know that it's really happening. There is so much room for someone to kind of give you empty promises, tell you that they've done work that maybe hasn't been fully completed or that is missing steps. There's also so much of a disconnect. So things are really lagging often through this system, right? So if this organization refers you, that referral may not show up for the next organization if they're using a different software, even though it's the same system. And so delays get delayed. Hold on. Referrals get delayed. There we go. Referrals get delayed or go missing or don't fully get processed and have to be redone because we're not using the technology in the wisest manner. And on top of that, I think no matter who you are, what you do, and whether you're experiencing homelessness or a crisis or you're providing those services, technology is a tool. It is not actually the extension of our fingers. You know what I mean? Like you have to have experiences and things outside of that. And kind of connecting to an earlier question that you asked me, part of what allowed me to navigate all of this and move through and rise above it was that I went and explored the world. I unplugged from that phone and unplugged from maybe an area that didn't make me feel as uplifted and empowered. And I'd go to the park and I'd go to a nice fancy neighborhood because I got enough money for coffee. So I can go sit and drink a coffee in a nice coffee shop and remove myself for a little while from hardship and just really be able to enjoy the present moment. And technology can make it a little harder for us to do that, but true control over your life comes from a sense of presence and a sense of gratitude in the moment.
And what digital communication gaps or hazards do young people most often face? And how can institutions like ClearPath NYC or CTD NYC help close them?
Definitely barriers. There's just flat out gatekeeping, paywalls, and all versions of that where if you want to get access to a resource or even to just information alone, you have to make an account, you have to be approved, you have to be referred in a lot of cases. And that just doesn't align with young people because they are very instant gratification driven. And I fall into that, you know what I mean? Like I shouldn't have to wait a week to get an answer. Like the answer should be pretty clear today. I should be able to know in the next 3 hours what's going on. And especially when you think about folks who are particularly in crisis, if they don't have a phone, they're borrowing someone else's phone or using a public computer to capture this data. Their phone might be on 5%, and then once that's that, they don't have a place to charge. So being able to get information to folks in a way that's barrier free and fast is very, very important.
I now want to move to storytelling and how that plays a role in your housing advocacy. And so you've spoken, like you mentioned, at events like the National Lived Experience Leadership and the Love Fest. And so what role does storytelling play in social justice, and how do you balance truth telling with trauma care?
So much like the for-profit industries, right, in business marketing, people don't buy things, they buy stories. And in the same way, people invest their time and their energy in things that they relate to and can connect to, or pulls at their heartstrings, or makes them feel a little more human because they can understand and empathize, even if they can't relate. And so it's very important to talk about the experiences that folks go through in a way that doesn't make them anything other than what they want to be, right? I think a lot about when we talk about communities that experience homelessness, we know that the stigma is people with mental health conditions, people who maybe have substance misuse and abuse disorders. And then that's kind of where we end it, right? It's like maybe people who are just generally poor. But in reality, everybody's got a story. And I often think about even the people who maybe do have a mental health condition, maybe are misusing a substance. They too have a story. They didn't just roll out of the earth one day and then just exist without having some sort of interaction with other people, some sort of letdown, some sort of trauma. And so it's really also important when we tell our own stories or we elevate other folks' stories that we're mindful of that trauma, that we're not invested in re traumatizing people. That's one of the pillars of trauma informed care is that you're intentional about not re traumatizing someone by making them tell their whole story to you again and again, by giving them the agency to reveal as much as they want and that be okay, that we're not doing the poverty porn thing. Like giving people the freedom to determine what is appropriate to share and let that be a healing sharing, not a remembering to start digging in it kind of thing.
And your writing for community-centric fundraising unpacks low wages and systemic racism. And so what key insights did you learn while researching that piece, especially around funding justice?
I love this question so much. I was really excited to research this piece, partially because I was a little angry. And so, what better fuel than a little bit of anger, right? And I was actually impressed with the many things that I found. And one of the key pillars was capacity building. That at the end of the day, if you really want to use money equitably, not just equally, but equitably, there has to be a backbone to your organization. It's not enough to receive a grant and then think you need to be able to pay your executive staff who makes the most amount of money in the org anyway from that grant. Like that's where capacity building and having general operating funding that isn't specific solely to the services or the support that you provide one allows you to when you do get grants that are specifically to give to other folks or to distribute amongst community through resources or whatever, you're using the most of it you can because your bills are already paid because everybody got to pay their bills, right? But there's a big difference between having the lights on whether or not you get a grant to do the services, and so that's one thing. Another is just in general resource redistribution, especially if an organization is the middleman between the funders and the fundees, then they have to think about not just who, like, rather, let me say it this way. If there is a middleman organization that instead of pleasing solely the funders, making sure their funders are happy, minimizing their impact so that their checks are cleared and the funders feel good about themselves, that's not going to have the same equitable impact as redistributing resources to the maximum capacity for those receiving the funds, even if that means not making your funders as happy as they could be. And that's something that, in general, in this sector, people are still a little afraid of and are starting to understand the value of. That it's not enough to simply appease your funders if you can't make real tangible solutions. That goes right back into the nonprofit industrial complex. Now you just need enough to get to the next cycle, to the next cycle. And That's more like chasing a dollar than helping people.
And what has been the most surprising response to your work from community members, audiences at events, fundraisers, really anyone?
Um, Generally speaking, people really appreciate whether it's a workshop or presentation or I've spoken at conferences. They really just generally appreciate the realness and the rawness and the logic because I try to make it very logical of like this is this, therefore. um, but there was a particular instance where an entity, we'll leave them nameless, an entity attended a conference that I was speaking at, attended our session, really loved our session, came and went out of their way. They found us the next day to tell us how much they loved the session. And then I was able to like inform them, you actually, your entity informed this workshop. And I used the flaws of your entity to make this workshop. And so the the surprise was that the person definitely was shook, yet they still enjoyed the conversation. It didn't end the conversation. There wasn't a response of defensiveness. It was like, whoa, I can't believe that you made something that I already love so much more real and bring it home kind of moment. Like, it's not just theory I'm talking about. I'm talking about real issues that need real work and can improve. And this was particularly around data and the subject of data. And so it's really nice when people who I think in the beginning of the conversation are coming into it with their prejudices against people experiencing homelessness and um, prejudices against people who use drugs, prejudices against people who maybe aren't the ideal client or ideal candidate. And by the end, I have unlocked a sense of like, oh, well, those behaviors make a little more sense, or oh, clearly, no matter what someone is doing, they still deserve a level of dignity and respect and care that allows them to flourish in their own life. So,
I now want to lastly move on to your vision, some challenges that might be involved in it, and just generic next steps. And so, looking ahead, what's the next frontier for your work, whether in art, research, or systems advocacy?
as far as art, um, I really want to make more pieces and have more exhibited pieces specifically about capitalism. I think we are in real time watching the collapse. And so, what better way to survive it than to start documenting and making stuff about it? I recently wrote a poem that really like helped me kind of have this breakup moment with capitalism because I'm not sold anymore. You know, I was like barely sold anyway, but now I'm completely unsold on this idea of like maximum profit, minimum expense, screw everybody. It just does not make any sense. As far as research, and I've been wanting to for a couple of years, so I'm excited to focus within the next couple of years on building this out. I want to research what folks go through while they're experiencing homelessness and while they're trying to navigate resources, whether that's the turnover rate of case managers that they have, which, as we know, is very high, or any sort of difficulties that they face, any grievances that they've been filing, how those things have been handled. Because it's important for me to highlight where the dignity piece is missing in a lot of this, and to really shift that. And so, with that being said, always down to find more places to speak and to educate folks and to continue to amplify like everyone gets dignity. I don't care who they are, what they do. Everyone gets dignity.
For listeners who feel stuck or overwhelmed by social injustices, what practical steps can they take, both personally and collectively, to promote systemic change?
You are so good with these questions. First, I definitely want to say, at the end of the day, rest is resistance. I love to reference Trisha Hersey everywhere I go because you can't accomplish anything with a dysregulated nervous system. It's just the reality. Or if you do, it's you in fight or flight. It's you in survival mode. So it's not the true and full you, the you that's not in the rat race, not afraid of tomorrow, not afraid of if you'll survive or not, right? And so we all have to prioritize our rest and well-being, and not just sleep. Sleep is a huge part of it, but also waking rest, doing things that don't make us money, that don't make us cooler, that don't get us more friends, but restore us, restore our grounded sense of self. And at the end of the day, homelessness and forced displacement is not unique to this country. It is a global housing crisis. The whole world is having this issue of housing has become speculative, of war and forced relocation, of settler colonialism still rearing its evil head. You know what I mean? All these things are making it impossible for the average human being to just live a whole day without having to be in the rat race, quite literally. And collectively, we have to reject it. That's really the only way, you know? We have to say, as a human race, as a human species, this is not being a human, period. And we want more for everybody, no matter who they are, no matter what they look like, no matter what they've got going on in their life. Aside from collective power, as an individual, it really comes down to getting in local organizing spaces, visiting bookstores and libraries. I was just in this local political bookstore on Saturday, and it was so lovely to see neighborhood folks kind of stroll in and out. And the books it's a bookstore and a library, and they're so excited to read different books. And they're reading Marcus Garvey, and they're reading, and I'm like, I don't know how you have time for this, but that's the power in it, right? Is that we don't disregard anybody as not smart enough, not accomplished enough, not interesting enough, and we make ourselves accessible to those folks, and we connect folks to resources and engage with those resources. So whether that's bookstores and libraries or mutual aid spaces, right? Food distribution spaces, harm reduction spaces, like whatever is a thing that feels like a talent, a skill, a hobby that naturally someone is drawn to, lean into that and find a way to do that to serve both yourself and community.
And as my last and final question, what advice would you give to your younger self, stepping into the MoMA Teens program, knowing the path you'd eventually walk to in 2025?
What a wonderful way to end it off. Um, I really don't even think about that version of me too often, so it's nice to kind of pull that memory. A couple of things. One, stop thinking that money will make you worthy and define you, and once you have the job, then you'll finally be a respectable adult. Like that chasing of success only pushes success further away. Um, let's see. That's one. Two, you could get into any space you want. You can be in the Ivy League space, you can be in the elite space, you could be on the block in the hood. It doesn't matter where you are. You have to be in a space that feels safe. Seek those spaces. Seek the spaces where you can be your authentic self, not the watered down, compartmentalized version of yourself that's palatable depending on who's in the room. The girl that's not a woman, that's nerdy and sophisticated and a little hood and a little ratchet and a little everything. Like just be your full self, because that's the spaces that deserve you, where you can be your full self. And then the last one is, and this is something I've been fully accepting this year, is that I really truly am an artist. Like I abandoned art for a decade, tried to work quite literally everywhere. And that's why a lot of things didn't work out. A lot of fields and industries, they did great things. And even now, I'm able to influence the nonprofit sector and influence different things. But at the end of the day, things weren't working out in a sense of this really feels fulfilling, because I am an artist and art is a beautiful thing to create and has so much weight while being so weightless and taking a weight off of me and the people who get to consume it. And so just really leaning into that and knowing that it's okay to have the job that you think makes no money. Thank you so much, Vedant. This has been so great.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for your experience and your time. I really appreciate it.